did fantastic, and the comments were amazing. People love you, Rupert.
We'll keep that going, hopefully. And it's and your community is absolutely brilliant, mate. I might give them a shout out when you introduce me, just in regards to how it's
They're
nice
doing
to be
fantastic
amongst like-minded individuals.
Yeah, very much so. All right, let's roll in, counting in 3, 2, 1. All right, we are back here on another episode of the XRP podcast right here. Of course, joining me on my right, that would be on my left,
My left.
is Mr. Rupert coming in from All In Crypto. How are you, man?
I am doing fantastic, Paul. It's a real pleasure to be back on your show, and a massive shout out to your audience for the response that we got on the first one. It's amazing to be with like-minded individuals that see this for the opportunity that it is, and we're going to get into that, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think the point was that obviously here on this podcast, we're trying to bring in the voices of XRP and really the Ripple community in general. There are many, many more that will be coming in. Of course, Rupert is a fan favorite, so we wanted to ask him back in. And I promised him that we would get him back in on the show. So Rupert, let's kind of dive into a few points of interest. And one of the things I want to kind of lead off with is the first element of maybe XRP venturing into the gaming world. And one of the things that happened just here recently, people are now talking about B3's move, which is maybe could be the catalyst of where this goes in terms of gaming introduction. And I'll show you guys something. And Rupert, I want to get your opinion on this as we look at some companies that have already kind of ventured into the gaming sector. XRP and the ledger has not necessarily been one to kind of take the spotlight. This was news coming in, and of course, this was on the announcement of B3's Open App Layer now welcoming XRP, and this partnership will, of course, be with XRPL Commons, and this is going to be launching a game chain on testnet. So they're going to call it Xcade. Basically, it'll be an on-chain arcade. I don't know that it's a big deal, but it starts to show that there's some activity coming in to this space. And if you look at the open app layer of what B3 is doing, these companies or this company particularly has already started to really build on a variety of platforms, including Base. Atari, of course, is tied into this on their ecosystem. They've got a handful of other emerging games that will be a big part of this. So it was just good to see that the ledger is now playing in this space. How big do you think gaming is going to become a category for the XRP ledger?
I certainly hope so. I'm a massive gamer myself. Got really stuck back into World of Warcraft Classic when it re-released. Probably spent way too much time on it, and of course took part when it initially was released, and sort of got to relive some of my youth, as it were. So I'm a big gamer myself. I think if you look at where GameFi is, if we can call it that, it really just shows how early this technology is in regards to the arc of adoption that it's venturing on. And I think it's only right for XRP to take a slice of that, being as capable as it is. How they choose to do that, though, is going to be interesting. David Schwartz has talked about federated sidechains that you could essentially facilitate this on. It would be interesting to find out how they conduct this, because I don't think that one chain can do everything. I could perhaps be wrong, and with sidechains, federated sidechains, you can really scale somewhat infinitely, horizontally or vertically, perhaps, depending on how you want to look at it. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do this, but gaming's just another kind of audience, I think, that will bring attention and heat onto XRP on top of what it's already doing. So I'm all for it personally.
Do you think that when you think about gaming in general, I think one of the big issues has always been throughput, transactions. Avalanche has been kind of noted for this, obviously, with their launch of a variety of different games, many of which have started to really accelerate in terms of just overall transactions. Then, of course, you look at Solana. That's a big gaming chain in terms of, again, high transaction flow and throughput. And we haven't really seen that within the XRP ecosystem. So I'm kind of curious, do you think this will maybe be a starting point where we'll see other game companies starting to look at the ledger as a resource for, new development?
Maybe I'm conflicted on that. I think that's probably the best answer that I could give. I would love it for the kind of gaming audience and the people that want to leverage distributed ledger technology to enhance the whole gaming experience, to look towards XRP. However, personally for me, I don't really see XRP as a gaming chain.
Okay.
There's chains out there that are specific towards gaming. Maybe it could be. Perhaps you get a really successful kind of side chain off of XRP that can enable that. But again, I think you don't want one chain that kind of does everything. You don't want a jack of all trades, as it were. I think XRP is more specific in regards to perhaps what it's trying to achieve. That doesn't mean that it can't also achieve other things in that bigger vision. So I'm conflicted, I would say, on that, Paul, in regards to, do I want XRP to be a gaming chain? If it can and manage all the other things successfully, sure. If not, we've got a massive, colossal sort of task at hand that I'd really like us to focus on. But interesting that we're starting to get the kind of attention from gaming companies, GameFi companies towards XRP.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is just the attention layer that starts to bring in, because this also generates a lot more interest around the core architecture of what the ledger is really meant for, being payments and settlement. Let's talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned in the pre-show a little about what's happening with FedNow. And there's some big updates here, I think, in the sense of where FedNow is. And I think for some of you that are brand new to the show, or maybe brand new to crypto, what is FedNow? Is basically, it's an instant payment service. This is something that is going to allow financial institutions and a lot of their customers, basically, where they can, do 24/7, 365, basically blockchain. You think of that. So it's processing payments much like what Swift is doing, but in a 365, 24/7 manner. Speed is the key here. The idea behind it is still messaging, so it kind of plays in alliance with what Swift is doing. Rupert, what are you seeing around FedNow that aligns with what's happening with XRP at the moment?
There's an awful lot, including the likes of the Federal Reserve of St. Louis back in 2014, actually putting forward the idea that Ripple could actually run alongside the Federal Reserve system to actually help process some of the transactions that it undertakes. And this is 2014. The FedNow sort of came about in 2013. That was actually headed up. That program was headed up by a guy called Ken Montgomery. He was the kind of program executive of the FedNow. FedNow openly admits that they use distributed ledger technology. He is now actually on the board of Ripple as it relates to stablecoins. So he went from the Fed in 2014. There seems to be a concurrent theme here to Ripple. Sorry, not 2014, 2024, he was at the Fed, he left, and then went over to Ripple. And the Fed now, they use essentially service providers to help them facilitate the 365, 24/7 trading. The interesting thing is, if you look at those certified service providers, around about 27 of those, there's 40 in total, have direct connections or perhaps indirect connections. They leverage services that are partners with Ripple to Ripple. So out of the 40, 27 of those actually already have connections or are direct partners with Ripple, the company itself. So there's a clear link there between the Fed talking back in 2014, an individual who many of you will be familiar with, David Andolfatto.
Yep.
He's been talking about how we can embrace distributed ledger technology and specifically Ripple for a long time. I think he even made a tweet on it. He's now moved on from the Fed, but he made a tweet on it, or an X post, I should correctly say, correct myself there, just the other day. So it's interesting that they've been talking about this for a long time. You have the FedNow service that are looking to utilize distributed ledger technology. They are doing that. They're certified kind of providers, 27, 28 of those actually have partnerships or indirect partnerships with Ripple already. And then if you fast forward to what just took place a week or so ago, you have the Fed Waller. Essentially, he's also from the St. Louis Fed, talking about how the Fed's ready to adopt this technology and see it as a natural evolution for payments. Now, the Fed's Waller is in charge of payments at the Fed. So I think It's very interesting. Me and you and your audience are very much believers in what this technology is going to do in regards to transforming payments. We just spoke about GameFi. GameFi wouldn't be possible on traditional rails.
Exactly.
You couldn't do those micro payments which DLTs introduced to us. But it's very interesting that you've got that evolution, and Ripple are already, in my opinion, as a company, very well positioned to aid the Fed in that transition. And actually, ultimately, that's going to be good for XRP, which I believe is going to provide liquidity and enhance the services all around. So very interesting stuff there.
Yeah, well, I think you have to kind of bring it down to a point where everyday businesses and individuals understand what this will impact. If you think about ACH, which is basically automated clearinghouse, these are the traditional payment processes right now. They do this in batches. And on a business side of things, even on individuals, it's usually 1 to 3 days to do that. Wire transfers are already very expensive. Then you get into things like real-time payment systems like Zelle or others that are out there. All of that potentially will now be replaced by on-chain immediate settlement and transfer. And I think this is the transition that we've talked about for quite some time, but it's also surreal that this is happening now, right now in our financial system. Here's my question to you, Rupert. You look at the amount of businesses that are out there, individuals that are willing to go this route, because I still find people that are, it's like when I say, hey, listen, let me pay for that in USDC. And a lot of times they might see, or Tether, whatever, or RLUSD, either one. The thing I get back typically is, can I put that in my bank? And it's the pushback of not understanding crypto. I'm like, listen, it's immediate. It's in your account. You can transfer it in US dollars, move it over there. Same kind of scenario. It keeps us from having to deal with that. Do you think we are close to this generational adoption of stable coins and also just this new payment architecture that really is right in front of us now?
It's at our doorstep, right? And I think the problem when you talk about kind of retail embracing this technology is it's really a UI problem more than anything. It's not a technology problem. It's an interface problem. We spoke last time I was on, Paul, about how the PayPal mafia, the very ominous PayPal mafia, but really they're just visionaries in regards to technology that happen to have involvement in Ripple. We spoke about that last time. If you look at how PayPal became successful, it was really down to their UI. They made it easy. All the other people who were trying to digitize money failed. So we have a similar problem today. GameFi perhaps also faces that as well, to bring up what we started on. And all that really needs to be solved is the UI. Once it's seamless and somebody doesn't need to ask you, okay, well, what do I do with this now you've sent me? It's problem solved, and you see the at that point broad adoption of this technology. We're seeing it at an institutional level. That's where we need to see it, and they're going to deal with the kind of UI problem and integrate this technology directly so that people don't need to ask what to do with it. It's here, and again, one reason that I gave your audience a bit of a shout out was because you clearly have a lot of people that are all congregating towards yourself, Paul. Massive congratulations on that. That understand what's happening with crypto for what it is, and that is a major wealth shift. Every technology provides a wealth shift. If you look at the companies that reigned supreme before the dawn of the internet, it wasn't the ones that are there today. They're all tech companies. In the future, it's going to be crypto companies and cryptocurrencies that have those large market caps. And the individuals that spot that trend early, like your audience, are going to benefit. So it's here, Paul. There's never been a better time to be in the cryptocurrency space, and just chuffed to be in the position I'm in with yourself talking about it.
I look at it this way, in the sense that where you're building an asset coffer right now, whether you're out there thinking about getting into crypto for the first time, you're just looking at XRP or other assets out there. The one thing that I think you have to remember, and this is something that is unfortunate right now, here in the US, we're dealing with a whole new revolution of baby boomers that are in the process of retiring. And I think our Social Security Administration now is funded up through around 2030 to 33. Eventually, this will be a bankrupt model unless Trump and others will change that. But I think that's the point for many people who are not retiring. You're not going to be able to count on that kind of opportunity where a Social Security Administration is going to bail you out. Nobody's coming for you guys. Nobody's coming for you. So really making decisions now in assets, and I think digital assets are going to be the way to go, whichever one that you guys choose on. But the point is you have control finally. You're at that point of control, that's the great thing. I think that a lot of people are finding out right now.
People always ask me, about what's my kind of retirement plan. Have I got a pension? Have I got things like this? I mean, I always cite that, I enjoy being an investor in the crypto space, and maybe that's here to save us as a
Yep.
kind of species more broadly. But what's very clear, and I know you do a lot of macro stuff, Paul, and are definitely paying attention to some of the big changes that are happening in the world economically, is that we are evolving economically. Crypto has a lot to do with it, and perhaps the things that saved people previously are no longer going to serve that role. We're
Exactly.
moving towards an economic singularity, and that has ramifications that I don't think we've got all the answers to. But you need to be self-sufficient. You need to, I think, really capitalize on this opportunity, and whatever else you can to kind of ease your passage into later life, I guess.
Well, and it's an issue right now where we're finally at I think the stage, at least here in the United States, where there's so many good regulatory scenarios that are playing out right now. Capitol Hill's getting ready to go back into session. We're going to be talking about the Clarity Act.
Yep.
Likelihood is the Clarity Act is most likely, if we get lucky here, going to go through this year, and if it does, then that starts to open up a whole new framework of how businesses are going to go about introducing themselves to the blockchain. And I'm talking about businesses that have never been in blockchain before. They've never done anything with crypto before. It is going to open up a landslide. Rupert, you're there in the UK. Obviously, MiCA regulations are now in effect. Have you already started to notice a little bit of a change around the businesses there in Europe that are trying to serve, especially in the financial sector? Has there been any big change?
There's been some pretty sensational changes. I think what you're looking at, the United States is leading this technological innovation due to the efforts of Trump and his cabinet. And I might say he's doing a remarkable job. I know we're going to get into the Clarity Act. We can talk about what Brian Steele said over the past 24 hours. But every country is going to have to get on board with this, because if they don't, they are going to face economic repercussions, social repercussions, kind of sovereign repercussions. One thing that Brian Steele, just to bring it up, spoke about in regards to one reasons they're so zealous on this technology is because if you look at the power that Web 2 gave the United States, it's unmatched. If you look at the United States technology companies, they allow the United States to reign supreme. And with this evolution, there's a similar opportunity at hand. And people should have learned from the previous one. So every nation, the UK, all your countries in Europe, Asia, Australia, they're all going to have to get on board with this. And one kind of revelation that we got was between Archax, Aberdeen, and Lloyd's Banking Group. And they conducted the first ever sort of live, it's not a trial, live demonstration of how to use a real world asset, tokenized gilts and money market funds. Gilts is just our debt instrument here in the UK for anybody that's not familiar. We don't call them treasuries, we call them gilts. They actually use that to settle an FX trade. Now, the United Kingdom accounts for half of the FX and derivatives around kind of interest rates in the world in terms of volume. We do about $5 trillion a day. And with Archax, Lloyd's, and Aberdeen, they're now live actually demonstrating how this can be done. So everybody's playing catch up. I'm sure there's many more individuals that are doing this in the UK or getting ready to do so. We are a little bit behind regulatory. We only just got approvals for retail to be able to hold ETNs. So ETNs is our ETF equivalent. We have exchange traded notes here, kind of similar to what you have in Europe. ETFs in the United States. We can only now, or the FCA, our SEC, have only just allowed us to actually, or taken away the rule that stopped us from actually purchasing the likes of Blackrock's iShares or something like this. So we are behind, but everyone's going to have to play catch up for that reason that it's literally a matter of national security and relevancy, right?
Well, and I think what Steele was talking about is that you look at, back to your point of the U.S. leading the way in Silicon Valley, And he's right. I mean, when you look at all the way to the original act around the birth of the internet and how data was going to be shared and what that was going to look like, the idea behind this revolution that is really going about here in the United States and really abroad. I think the US was kind of pushed into this through, and I'm still not sure when Trump first started running that he understood completely what this industry was about to do. And all it needed was good clarity in terms of regulation that was going to change it and possibly open up a new, renaissance for technology. So I'm curious whether you think that the U.S. can do, a repeat on what they did in Silicon Valley, or do you think, Rupert, that this will be more of a level playing field between the likes of the EU, if you think about what's happening in Dubai in terms of development, and even in Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, those areas? Do you think it's going to be a little bit more of a level playing field now?
Probably not. Power kind of begets power, I think. And I think if you look at the United States, like look at all your large crypto companies,
Yeah,
despite all the regulatory persecution,
still did it.
that's
Yeah.
where they're trying to be. If you look at, you're kind of, there's that, who was it that just launched the American-made ETF? Was it Canary?
Canary, yeah,
Yeah,
Canary.
Canary launched that.
Yep.
Look at the ones that are in there. They're typically the largest altcoins, right? So
Yep.
I think the United States has a major lead right now. I think they have all the kind of things in place to maintain that lead. That being said, and competition is an amazing thing because it's going to keep the United States on their toes and make a better product for everyone. It's also going to encourage all the other nations to do so. This is why I'm kind of free markets, right? Competition is a good thing. It creates innovation. So this competition that we're going to see is really healthy. In my opinion, the United States is top dog when it comes to crypto. I believe they're going to, just like with Web 2, and probably because they have those leaders in Web 2, actually continue that lead, kind of leveraging the powers that they already have. But that doesn't mean that it's not quite as, or it's not the same as Web 2 in the sense that the United States really do have the monopoly. Barring China, there's a reason that China don't allow US tech companies in there, and we don't allow Chinese tech companies in America. It's a power thing more than anything. We'll see, but they might not have such a lead in regards to what they have in Web 2. I think likely, though, America, and we're already seeing that lead in terms of Web 3, and they're going to continue to do that. And if you look at like your treasury companies, for example, look at MicroStrategy, look at some of your others, they're in the United States, right? And I think that it's that kind of point that we both touched on about the persecution that crypto companies went through within the United States. Despite that, they still all want to get to the United States. Why is that? Well, it's because of that liquidity. It's because of that kind of user base. It's because of the tech. It's because of a variety of things that again are really going to position the United States as a leader in this. And when you talk about kind of liquidity and capital, it's remarkable just how well the likes of an XRP kind of product has done despite not being regulated and enabled in the United States. I mean, you're at 2.6 billion in terms of assets under management globally for XRP kind of funds, if you will. We don't have the ETFs yet in the United States. It's very telling of what's to come and exciting once that capital's unlocked. As a little side note there.
All right, so you mentioned treasury companies, Rupert, and this is something that we've talked about before. Let me showcase this article right here. Vivo Power, Doppler Finance, they're now partnered up, driving 30 million XRP investment into XRP Ledger. And of course, this is going to change things up significantly because what they're talking about is this right here. And in the press release, they basically said they're going to put in the pilot deployment, 30 million now, potential scaling up to 200 million over time.
Wow.
I think this is going to change because of much greater, we could see this going up to as much as 500 million. Here's why I think that. And that is this right here. This is talking about the Rox Park. He's the head of Korea Doppler Finance. And he was talking about the strength of South Korea's XRP community holding a 20% circulating token supply, which I did not realize that was the case. Did you know that?
I didn't. I know that there's very high trading volumes in South Korea. And just to mention, South Korea as a nation is exceptionally good at adopting innovative technology. They're usually ahead if you look at technologies, certainly that have came about in my lifetime, South Korea have always been early adopters. So it's no surprise really that they're kind of adopting XRP in the manner that they are. It's interesting that you mentioned the 500 million in regards to where you think Vivo Power can get. Is Trident Digital Tech Holdings not planning on a 500 million sort of purchase and strategy also?
Well, that's my point. Is you've got this bit of race occurring in the DATs right now, the treasury companies. My question is whether or not these will actually be the leaders. If you look at ETH, it's BMNR without a doubt. They've started to go well ahead of what SBET is doing, which is SharpLink Gaming. That's Joseph Lubin versus BMNR, which is Tom Lee. Yep. Then you have Vivo, which is kind of leading the space right now. Do you anticipate that we'll see kind of a new, we'll call it an XRP race to hold more treasury? Is that coming as we get more clarity in the regulatory frameworks?
Yeah, I believe so. I think if you look at what MicroStrategy did for Bitcoin, if you take what MicroStrategy accumulated off of Bitcoin supply, it actually made Bitcoin deflationary. Pretty remarkable, right? Yeah. And I think these XRP treasury companies are going to very much do a similar thing. And I think once you get that regulatory clarity, you might start to see some big kind of acquisitions and things like this take place in the United States that already have a lot of capital sat on the side that dominate that arena. I mean, if you look at your BMNR and your sort of Joe Lubin, what he's doing with his Ethereum strategy, and also the ex-head of Blackrock Digital Assets, right? I believe.
Yeah.
Huge guy to have on there. You know, it's
not a bad hire.
A common theme, right? All these big financial players end up at crypto. You know, we saw the same thing with the internet. It's very interesting how they're the two largest, probably because they could raise the most capital, right? And they had a face behind them. You might see something similar. And I wouldn't be surprised if you do, coming out of the woodworks in the United States. And it only makes sense, right? You've got Bitcoin treasury companies, you've got Ethereum treasury companies. XRP's banging that sort of third position, whether it takes over Ethereum or Bitcoin eventually in the future is, you know, the jury's still out on. That's going to be an interesting saga to follow. But I do think you're going to see an acceleration in these companies. It only makes sense, right? Certainly if they start to make money. And what Vivo are doing with Doppler is actually looking to leverage that XRP they have in the strategy and create yield. These companies are going to have to distinguish themselves. I know Tom Lee spoke about how they're going to potentially use the staked Ethereum and the yield off that to potentially reward investors or stock buyers as a whole. So very interesting, all of this. And it's another catalyst that goes in XRP's favor. You know, we spoke about gaming, speaking about how it's revolutionizing the financial sector, XRP strategy companies, you know, ETFs, so much going on right now.
Well, and here's my argument, because people ask me this right now is, Paul, is this a bubble? You know, a lot of these treasury companies, essentially, if you're leveraging the assets, you're trading against the MNAV, which is basically the value of the asset to the value of the company. And I look at it this way: it might be a bubble on a handful of fronts. Now, a lot of these tokens and digital assets, I don't believe would be good for a treasury company. I'm not pointing out any token, but some of them, the two that I do think are winners, will be XRP and Bitcoin. Now, MicroStrategy, I just think they're too big to fail now. They're gonna figure out a way around this. But XRP has such a support level from the retail sector that would most likely weather it through a bear market. And most likely we're going to continue to see companies trying to figure out who's going to be the top dog. It's kind of like who's going to be the IBIT, you know, when it comes to ETFs. Same kind of thing. I think the scale of it is going to be, is it, and I asked this question to Canary Capital, which, to Stephen. I knew what he would answer, but I want to get your answer, Rupert. Do you think ETFs win, or do you think the digital asset treasury companies win in the future for market mindshare? Just market mindshare, maybe not necessarily investment level, but what people are talking about, the attention side of things. What are your thoughts?
Oh, that is a really tough one, actually. I think if you're talking about, and I know we're not talking about this, but capital that actually will flow into these companies or the ETFs, I think the ETFs win. We've seen that thus far. But in terms of the kind of hype and attention and mind share, as you put it, you could have, I mean, MicroStrategy has been nothing short of a success story, right? This
Yeah,
is a
good
company
example.
that was, really dead. Maybe not the right terminology, but I'm going to use it after the dot-com crash. It never really did
Definitely
any.
a struggling company. Yep.
Absolutely, that's a better way to. That's a more polite way, perhaps, to put it. And then all of a sudden, it adopted Bitcoin, and you've seen what it's done. You know, it really just gone from strength to strength to strength. You could get people love a winner, right?
Yep.
And if you get an XRP company that does that, the kind of hype and attention and
Huge.
and certainly if it starts to explore interesting ways to yield farm, hopefully not too risky. So I'm going to go with these strategy companies. From an excitement point of view, I actually think could outperform your ETFs. I think you're going to see more volume though naturally in your ETFs, just because it's what people are familiar with, right? We're creatures of comfort.
Well, and I think that to your point is the ETFs they're going to be designed for a different kind of investor,
Yes.
versus, somebody looking for the next Tesla out there in terms of a stock to buy. That's where you get into the digital asset treasury. And if you get a company that is maybe a true micro-strategy model, and then you apply in a yield factor, maybe Vivo Power is the one. I don't know, but it could be others that could come to the game. And I think this is only going to be good for all, I think all XRP and crypto holders in general. This is fantastic for the crypto market.
If we see a similar thing with these XRP strategy companies to what we did with MicroStrategy, you're going to see a lot of XRP get taken off the table. And
Exactly. Yeah.
it's another kind of arrow in our quiver, if you will. It's another kind of catalyst going for XRP as an asset. And I think
It's
really
huge.
excited for all of this.
Listen, I'm going to share something with you guys, and this is our Barron Crypto Index. This is over on paulbarron.com. You guys, paulbarronnetwork.com. And the way that the BCI works is we go out and we basically run analytics on three major components on the top assets. Part of this that makes it up are based on not only the market cap, but also the fundamentals of the chain. And then we look at the sentiment rating that is derived from a model that we've built over many years to basically measure. And this is one of the tools that we measure a lot of the communities around these companies and these blockchains. So you can go, you guys won't be able to get to this if you go over and visit unless you're a Forge member. That's the only way you can get to it. But I'm going to share it to you guys free. Absolutely. These are the assets that we have. We just updated for the September date. And I'm sorting this right now by sentiment. And right now, you've got XRP and Uniswap leading the way. And let me kind of zoom in on that for you guys. Leading the way in terms of overall sentiment score, which is hovering at around an 86. This is very high on the sentiment ranking. This is 1 to 100 sentiment, 100 being best, of course. Composite score of 87 right now on XRP. So it literally is outpacing ETH and Bitcoin, which are holding very strong at around 84 down the slide, including optimism. Then you get into, we'll throw out the stablecoin, but ETH, Bitcoin, Solana holding in at 83, Aave, and then Chainlink 82, XLM coming in at 82. So these are some of the top ranked assets out there. And if you just go off a fundamental score, we'll sort that down. Bitcoin leads at a 97, ETH, Sol, BNB, and then XRP comes in on a fundamental score at 88. Composite score total 87. So the way that people use this, guys, is this should be a validator of, and I'll just go down through so you can kind of see all the assets that we currently track. But we currently update this twice a month. It gets a new sentiment score rating. And then, of course, right now there's 56 tokens in there. This may rotate some of them in and out of the list, but right now there's 56 available over on the BCI. The composite score, pretty simple: market cap, liquidity, trade velocity, sentiment data, and then community strength. That's the one that we're watching the most of. Guys, XRP made a move. So my question is, Rupert, why do you think that is?
I think with everything going on right now, right? I think it probably maybe has something to do with the lawsuit and the fact that that's only recently been put to bed.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the kind of saga that is the cryptocurrency space, XRP's been with us a hell of a long time. It's had a lot of time to build that network. It's fought very hard for it as an asset. We spoke in the last meeting that we did about how XRP holders really see the wood through the trees. And I think this is all leading into it being very well positioned from a kind of sentiment point of view. You know, people are now seeing it coming out the other side. They're looking at what's happening in the United States. Perhaps they watch what Fed Waller had to say and says, hang on a minute, XRP's doing exactly this. What about what Trump had to say? What about what Besant had to say? XRP fits the kind of job application that the United States is putting out there in regards to what it's trying to do. So I think this is a collage of very exciting things that are taking place right now, and they all link to XRP. And I think people recognize that. It's why I gave a shout out to your audience, because clearly they do. And that's a very special place to be, I think.
Well, and you know, beyond the community side, you get price action in the space. A lot of, I think, new people coming in now for the first time. They're always looking at, all right, what are the top 3 things I can buy? It's like any investor. They'll go to the market. They'll look at, okay, I'm going to buy some Bitcoin. Maybe I'll buy a little ETH. And then what's my next asset down? It's usually going to be XRP. And I think that is now starting to transition into a whole new investor group. And here's the beauty. When you're brand new to the space and you step into crypto Twitter, and we all know what that's like.
Brutal, right?
Toxic,
but beautiful.
It could be toxic. It could be beautiful. It depends on what community you land in. And I think if people land in the XRP community, they find out quickly that this is a very welcoming community, very educational, you know, guys like you and many others that we've had on the show that just spend tireless hours dedicated to research and analysis. I think that's one of the biggest factors that kind of leads this community going forward, because they're soaking up all these new people, you know, and they're teaching them what's going on. So I think that's beautiful. Let's talk about price right now. And there's a couple of analysts out there pointing to this $13 in 40 days. I don't know if you saw this article over on Finbold. I'll share this with you and bring it up. Because when you look at price right now, a lot of people have been analyzing what has been in the charts. I think still the ETF is the thing that we most likely will get the next move up. Obviously, there's been a nice little move here over the recent days as we trade right around 280 as well. But if you look at one of the things they said is if the XRP market cap could surge to about 772 billion, this would make it the second ranked cryptocurrency, assuming ETH records minimal growth during this same period. And ETH has been kind of in a little bit of a lull here in the last 10 days. Rupert, when you look at that and you kind of compare this to where XRP is right now, price-wise, are there any things you're watching for that would be catalyst to drive this?
I think there's clues elsewhere and with other charts. So I think if you look at the total cryptocurrency market, excluding Bitcoin, that is on the cusp of breaking out into price discovery. We look at that, you know, we kind of like to use traditional technical patterns. There's a pattern out there called the cup and handle pattern. It's really a story of price discovery. You know, it's a very reliable pattern. Once it forms and breaks, you then go on and embark on higher ground. And I think the total cryptocurrency market cap, excluding Bitcoin, is on the cusp of breaking out. Now, the interesting thing is if you look at an XRP chart, it is literally just consolidating in and around prior all-time highs that were given in 2017. Mm-hmm. It's my belief and a very strong conviction that I have that not only is your total cryptocurrency market, excluding Bitcoin, your total two going to break out into price discovery, but the likes of XRP is about to do a similar thing. You know, it is, what, $2.87 today? $13. Not entirely sure how that price prediction was given. I know there's that triangle pattern everybody's looking at that's been forming, that wedge-like pattern that's been forming since 2017. Our prediction for that is $19.27, where this pattern takes us. Mm-hmm. And the last time we were on, we spoke about how we could probably or potentially see that before the end of the year. I think that's very plausible given some of the things that me and you have spoken about fundamentally, where the chart is itself. You've got treasury companies, you've got ETFs. The demand for an XRP ETF is evident in regards to the fact that there's 93 ETF filings for crypto right now waiting to be approved. 1/4 of them are XRP,
Exactly.
perhaps specific. I think you've got something like 7 baskets that have XRP in them, all of them, and 19 actual specific XRP ETF filings. So there's a demand from that. The CME came out and said that XRP futures contracts were the fastest ever future contracts to get to $1 billion in open interest. Took 3 months. That's faster than Bitcoin. That's faster than Ethereum. The ETF is a major catalyst that I think a lot of people are focused on, but I think people are underestimating. Certainly Nate Garcia seems to think that. And I think it's actually going to beat Ethereum to get to that $10 trillion mark. Not $10 trillion. Let's hold our horses. $10 billion. Ethereum took 250 something days to get to $10 billion in assets under management. Bitcoin took, I think it was 52, something around that mark. I'm not sure we can beat the 52 days to get to 10 billion. Maybe we can fall somewhere in between. So the ETFs are a major, major catalyst. You've got your treasury companies like Vivo Power that we mentioned and some of the others. You've got institutional usage. I'm sure we all saw the Thune and Ripple announcement literally just the other day. This is huge. Thune are no joke in regards to a company, over 130 companies, in 130 countries. They operate with some pretty big individuals. You had Link Logis, the largest trade finance technology platform in China, partnering with Ripple.
Huge.
These are all catalysts talking about the real usage of this, the kind of asset side of things, the treasury companies, the ETFs, and then potentially a good time for crypto historically being the end of the 4-year cycle. These are all fundamental catalysts that align with where the chart is right now, about to break out into price discovery, that lead me to believe it's going to be a sensational end to the year. So $13, $19. One thing that I do know is you're going to see some insane price action on the back end of 2025. And I think that continues into 2026 based on perhaps the S&P and things like that and how that's looking.
Rupert, do you think, because this is, it's a question that we ask for a lot of traders. I know you guys run charts quite a bit there at All in Crypto, but do you think that we are in a phase right now, because I get different analysts that kind of point to, hey, we're heading for a calamity, at least in the treasury market and securities market. Do you think that we float through the end of this year and into next year before we do see a pullback in the markets in general? Where would you say is, I'm not pinning you down to say here's where the bull market starts, but what's your gut and your research showing you that where this could slide into? Latter half of next year, early next year? What do you think?
I think, again, we often when you're trying to work out where the broader markets are heading, we can tackle the treasury thing in just a second. Sometimes the answers don't lie in the cryptocurrency space, which is somewhat right now at the behest of the broader markets.
Yeah.
Last time I came on, we spoke about what Mike Wilson was saying over at Morgan Stanley and the fact that he believes we've entered a new bull market. And he derives that from the fact that on the back end of Trump's new presidency, the market sold off to the magnitude of 20+%. That's technically a bear market in the S&P. By market, I'm talking specifically about the S&P 500 here. Now, we've entirely engulfed that. The sentiment had the situation wrong. We saw GDP stats that got put onto the blockchain. By the way, huge. Right. Me and you could do a podcast on that on its own, right?
Yeah.
And what that means for the world. So the market's clearly got the situation wrong. 3.3 was the last GDP report. Some predicting Q3 going to be 3.5, some of the Feds. The technical significance of the S&P actually engulfing that entire bear market, if you look historically, every time it's done that, going back to 1981 and prior, it's led to continuation in regards to higher prices being achieved. So a bull market like what Mike Wilson is suggesting. So if the S&P is going to continue higher, how is crypto going to fare in that environment? Certainly with everything going on. My guess is it's because it's correlated with it, it's going to continue with it. So I think in terms of this topping out, I think you're actually going to have a decent year next year. You're going to have turbulence, of course, like you have every year around seasonality, like what we've just gone through.
Yep.
I don't see this bull market ending. Typically what we've experienced is the 4-year cycle, and that's going to run us into the coming months, and that's going to be the end of it. I see the continuation in this. In terms of the treasury market, I think every single person right now is going, this has to end, right? This can't continue. Well, why? Why can't this?
Exactly. Yeah. You look at it. Well, I'll to hit on your point. I'm going to show something here real quick because this goes into the S&P 500 all the way back into 2008, and I'll bring this chart up. So this is right here. What I'm showing on screen was March of 2009. That was the bottom of the market after we saw the major economic crisis in 2007 and 8 start to plateau, and this was basically the market pull down that you had, which was hovering right around 1500 on the S&P. And the pullback on that, if you go back up here to the high to where its bottom was, I mean, that was a 56% pullback in the S&P 500, really in a very short period of time. You're talking about less than a couple of years. And then if you zoom out on this, Rupert, and start to look at that upward trend where I show the rest of the chart, look at this insane run that we've been on. And this just continues, except for right there. We all know what happened in 2020. And then the expansion. My question is this is what Tom Lee says, are there two areas? Is this actually where the bull market and the bear market was? And is this the new generation of a bull market? So, because if you look at that time frame right there from that top to where we are right now, this was really a zone of about, what was that? There you go. From what was, let's look at it, almost a year. So you had a pullback again of another 27%, almost 30% down. And then where Tom Lee is getting back to, which is pointing at this vertical move right now. So I don't know. This is a very intriguing time. 64.35 as we talk today.
Yeah, maybe that was your bull. Maybe the pullback that we've just had, which is what Mike Wilson seems to think was your bear, and now maybe it is a new bull. And if it is a new bull, you for sure got high, I mean, it's a bull market, right? Higher price ahead. So if the S&P is doing that, I think you need to analyze the markets in a kind of 360 manner, like you're extremely good at doing. And often the clues lie elsewhere. And if it's a generally flourishing time, there's other charts that give me confluence. If you look at the IWM, which is the Russell 2000 versus the S&P 500, that might be about to break to the upside. What's the context of the economic environment for small caps to outperform large caps? For example, a crypto kind of specific...
Well, it's rotation. Yeah, it's rotation like into altcoins.
And it has to be a good environment. Yeah, it's to the point that I was just going to come on to. If you look at Bitcoin dominance right now, so our assessment of Bitcoin dominance is in a downtrend. That is a good economic environment. You could use Bitcoin dominance as a barometer for what the S&P 500 is going to do. Bitcoin dominance is falling. Likely assets are doing well, right? So I think we've got a good time ahead of us.
Yeah, let me pull up dominance real quick just to that. That's the channel that it broke out of, which was really a question of whether or not we had entered the altcoin season right here as we continue to slide down. But there is a little bit of light here, at least on Bitcoin dominance, where sentiment's starting to come up a little bit after a couple of weeks of sideways movement, holding it around 58. So it's interesting because it might be one of those fake outs that we've been talking about. I know Ben Cowan talks about dominance. He thinks that we may see another run on Bitcoin. And if that goes into, let's say, October, November, do we actually see a rotation in December? Again, all this centered around what's happening with the Fed. So, geez, man, everything's happening all at once, Rupert. It's all at once.
We're talking about bullish XRP catalysts in regards to all the things that we mentioned, how it might achieve $13, $19, whatever it might be. But there's a lot of economic catalysts out there also, like perhaps what the Fed are doing. There's so much happening. And this is why people need to and definitely subscribe to yourself, is because you need somebody like yourself, Paul, and like some of the others out there that can essentially break it all down. And that this is what they do for a living, because normal people don't have and I'm a normal person, but I'm fortunate to be in the position I am to be able to do this full time, the time to actually keep up with all this, because there's just so much going on. The Treasury market, Paul, I'd be interested in actually your take on the Treasury market, because there's so many different takes out there. I think the consensus is it's going to lead to a disaster. I asked the question why, and everyone's going to be shouting at the screen saying, well, isn't it obvious? But I think the real question is why. Why can't this just continue? Like at one point, $100 billion in debt would have been a major thing, and people would be saying the same thing as they are today. What do you think?
Well, I think and I think the real question is how does Powell come out of this issue that they're faced with? right now. Because if you look at the comparison of where we were, which was pretty much 0% interest, which is why we're having this issue where I won't say it's a large amount of companies in the U.S. that are now filing bankruptcy, but basically they no longer have access to that cheap capital. So they basically their run rate is done. So when you look at that and the potential here where Powell is going to be pushed into, I think he's going to get into a printing situation again. And if that does happen, then we will continue to see this in terms of an upward trend in terms of assets, digital assets being kind of the risk on. But the bigger question I think right now is this: when you look at where the Fed is today, you look at the current market structure that we're dealing with, and to your point, is that all of this bullishness that's coming, and including the Clarity Act, the regulatory framework, the global nature of business growing, I think we're in a position right now where we could go into. I don't want to agree with Tom Lee because I don't think we're in a 10-year bull run, but I have a feeling that there are some big indicators here. Something would really, I mean, it would literally take a black swan
Yep.
to cause an event, at least at this point right now, unless Powell comes in and just does something crazy in September and October, which still is in the cards, man. It's still in the cards.
Who knows in this environment, right? I mean,
Yeah.
his Jackson Hole speech, I think, was very telling, perhaps in regards to what they want to do moving forwards, and the markets initially enjoyed that because they want that clarity. Markets don't like uncertainty. Trying to predict the future is one of the hardest possible things to do, right? And we use charts and the likes of the indicators that you've created to try and help us or aid us in that. I think one thing that's it's why this space initially came into existence. One thing that's pretty certain is they're going to continue to devalue currencies around the world.
No doubt. Yeah.
I just ordered, I wish I had it to hand, an entire collection. The greatest inflation in history took place in Serbia during the 1990 period. Most people think Venezuela or something like that. It was actually Serbia. And I have a 10 dinar note going all the way up to a 500 billion dinar note. And this took place in a matter of, couple of years, really.
Yeah.
And we are in a similar, very different in terms of context, but equation in regards to the currency systems that we use. They're just happening at a far slower rate than Serbia, which is an extreme example. And assets in that context, providing that they're in the right place, are always going to do well. It's like housing, and people need to remember that. And investing is one of the most important things that you could possibly do, not just for yourself, but the people around you, your loved ones. And crypto right now offers just that sensational opportunity. So whether we have a dip, at the end of this year, my opinion is it's short-lived, and Bitcoin has really benefited from the devaluation of the dollar, but so have the stock market. People talk about stock markets and the insane kind of valuations that it has.
Same kind of scenario. Yeah.
It's just a Bitcoin, really. It's just has a company behind it, right?
Yeah, it is for sure.
So an interesting world.
If you guys are not following All In Crypto, your daily crypto dose, well, this is where you need to go. Real All In Crypto over on YouTube. You'll catch Rupert and his lovely performance here. Are you doing daily videos? What's the format here?
Yeah, so we do videos every single day. We do like a daily market update where we try and cover the things that we think are relevant or that you should know about that have happened in the crypto space and more broadly the kind of economic sphere. Every single day, we throw technical analysis in that. And then we do kind of evening videos where we cover specific projects. So it could be, for example, XRP strategies, or there's one coming out tonight, which would already be out by the time this airs, in regards to the Fed talking about Ripple in 2014. So we typically do one of those in the evening, and then we'll do interviews with sort of industry players, whether that's the largest crypto ETP providers or hedge funds or stuff like that. So we do quite a lot. We love this
variety.
We love talking to people like yourself and Paul. It's always an absolute pleasure to be on with you, mate.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, listen, we're going to be covering this and a lot more here on this show. Rupert, we're going to have you back on, but next time I'm going to bring you on with an H-bar guy.
Fantastic.
All right, and we'll talk a little about Hedera because that's another project that I'm kind of curious about in terms of where the market's going. Listen, you guys, if you're not subscribed to the show, just do that right now. Just take a little bit of time, hit that little subscribe button right down there. And of course, share this out there in the community, because as we drop these videos, we try to get ahead of it. This one will air. Typically what we're doing, Rupert, is we'll drop them on the next morning. So this will probably go into edit this afternoon. They'll drop some nuggets tonight on social.
Fantastic.
Hopefully it'll drive people into tomorrow morning's airing of this show. So we'll catch you next time right here on the XRP podcast. Take care.